Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. This week we're going to be checking back in with one of our favorite humans from the Bluegrass, Kentucky Teacher of the Year, Willie Carver Jr. He's going to be joining us as a co-host this week, as unfortunately Kimberly is dealing with some things and can't really be with us this evening. So please send her some positive vibes, would you? You know she would do it for you. Just take a second and send that energy her way. We are going to talk about the state of teaching in Kentucky with Willie, what he's been up to, and then we're also going to just cover just how bad Rand Paul truly is, as he's doing everything in his power to show how much he supports the orange authoritarian in the wake of Ray Lago. We've also got a great guest, Hank Linderman, who is running for Congress for the 2nd Congressional District. We're going to hear about him and his kind of vision of democracy in that part of the state, and how Democrats can get their act together. And then we're going to close with our call to action. We got a few different things we're going to tell you about to get you plugged in. But first, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? Team, we are a red state right now. We're the kernels of truth, so I'm not going to be able to lie to you about that. We are a red state. But in 83 days, we can show some serious signs of progress. In 83 days, we're going to pick between Rand Paul and Charles Booker. We're going to pick whether or not we're going to give women any reproductive freedom in our Commonwealth. We're going to pick on a bunch of different, at the local level, state elections, state senators, state house members, big decisions about the direction of our Commonwealth. And we need your voice and your vote. If you want a Commonwealth that works for all of us, get involved in these next 83 days. You can join Progress Kentucky. We're going to be doing a lot. You can just follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you spend time on social media. Make sure to like and share and comment on our content. If you like what you're hearing on Kernels of Truth here, just give us a thumbs up. Leave us a review. That's really helpful for the podcast, or just share out the show. But it truly is, it's kind of a decision point for our state on November 8th, which direction we're going to head. Are we going to send a bunch more of these kind of minions to Frankfurt to stand in the way of progress, to do everything in their power to take Andy's power away? Because that's what that GOP super duper majority has been doing. And it's definitely something that we have a role in it. And we can make a difference if we get involved and get engaged. So I hope you will. All right, so let's go into some introductions. Check in with our co-host. We're just let everyone know who you are, where you are, what does your protest sign say today? And if you are watching on the internet, let us know what your protest sign says today. There's plenty to protest. Personally, my name is Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg, which is, of course, a subdivision of Lexington. It's deed restricted, so there are lots of rules of what you can and cannot do. So despite the fact that I have a Charles Booker yard sign, I cannot put it out because the HOA will not let me put out a yard sign until 30 days before the election. So watching the clock on that one. But my protest sign says today, and this is in honor of another huge victory from the Biden White House and from the Democrats' leadership in Washington, D.C. If you can see it, mine says, there is no planet B. So we had, of course, this just yesterday, Joe Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which, despite the name, is an enormous investment in climate change and clean energy, and gives us the tools to, put us on track to come very close to our Paris Agreement emissions reduction pledges. There's more we need to do, but I think that's a really important step. And after basically writing off West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, he came to the table. They got a deal done, and it's while it's not everything, it's something. It is really something, and of course, it does lots of other great things too. It lets them negotiate drug prices through Medicare. It does a lot of good for tax fairness, right? So it makes a 15% corporate minimum tax, closes a bunch of loopholes, and basically lets that fund the clean energy investment. So really important stuff. All right, so we're seeing some other signs in the chat. We've got a Go Booker Go sign. And Nate, of course, our amazing producer and musician who wrote the music you just heard, Ixnay on the Indians May. I don't know if that's a sign or just something he wanted to share. And all right, but now let's check in with our co-host, Willie. Willie, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome. How are you?
I'm beautiful. Summer's coming to an end. It's been a great summer. Hopeful for what might happen after what we saw in Kansas. What else? No other option? Hope. I'm hopeful.
Hope's good. We like hope. What's your protest sign say today, Willie?
Should have thought about it more. Right now, it's grow up. Feel like, but that seems offensive to kids who wouldn't nearly be as annoying and puerile as some of these people on the other side of the aisle. I just want to have one adult conversation with someone I disagree with. Like, if you're out there, please talk to me because I want to know what that sounds like without someone screaming, "Go Brandon," or saying things that are blatantly false. Like, I want to find the grown-ups. And I think the kids are the grown-ups.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that for sure. I mean, so my daughters are back at school. Their first kind of full week going through that right now, and they definitely are processing a lot, and they're doing it pretty well. And I'm impressed every day about new school and new classes with a bunch of new friends, and they're just handling it really well. So, yeah, maybe they should be giving lessons to the teachers, not the teachers, but the parents. And I feel bad for the teachers because I do feel like there's a lot going on right now, and there are a lot of challenges that are being thrown at them. Obviously, if folks have seen Willie on our show, and they know that you are the 2022 Teacher of the Year for Kentucky, which is amazing and an awesome honor. You've been an advocate for teachers and for LGBTQ folks in schools and viewpoints being shared openly and honestly. But I saw on the interwebs that you're not back in the classroom this year.
No.
So what's going on there, and what led you to that decision, and what are you up to?
A lot of things led me to the decision, but the short of it is hostility and cowardice. I would say hatred, but I don't think that the homophobia I was dealing with came from a place of administrators actually disliking queer people. I think it came from the fact that we live in this hyper political society right now in which a single parent, a single crazy voice in the wilderness saying anything is treated seriously. And this gets back to where are the friggin' grown-ups? When we have someone saying horrific things about students, when I have someone doxing the students in my class, why isn't an administrator saying this is inappropriate and you need to stop talking? We know that this is not true. We're not seeing that. So that was my personal big reason. But I think in the big picture, we talk a lot about teachers as insurgents, that we're part of cultures that we know cause harm, and we have to sort of do the work of trying to make up for that in whatever spaces and roles we can create. But at a certain point, right, you're on the bad side of things. At a certain point, you can't be part of something that is doing so much harm that it's irreconcilable with your moral approach. And I think that's the big one for me. I don't think I can do the work that I do and feel good about myself knowing that I'm a part of education in a lot of places. I think there are some schools that are doing it right. I just need more context because I haven't seen it.
Wow. So what you're getting at is that in your teaching situation that you were in, that you got accolades, right? You got acknowledged and recognized, maybe not so much from the actual school you were working in, but you obviously that took you into some amazing places, and I want to touch on that in a second. But I think you get my question. So you weren't supported there, and you weren't feeling like what you were trying to do as a teacher was acknowledged as valuable, and you weren't given the space to do it.
It wasn't even so much that I wanted to be. I think at a certain point, like when you reach the Teacher of the Year point, there's a symbolic. You become a symbol, right? My students who are queer are like, oh, there's a queer teacher. And I think it's at that point that me not being recognized matters. I think before this, it didn't really matter. What really mattered was the hurdles. What really mattered was the constant friction. Like, oh, I don't know, said the word gay in class. You had a quiz on Dolly Parton said the word drag queen. Can we have 3 consecutive serious meetings with multiple members of administration as if you've done something horrific? It's seeing other queer teachers be suspended for saying a curse word in a TikTok, a private TikTok, and knowing this is an uphill battle against queerness, and it's not a space that I feel aligns with the kind of work I want to do in my life. Even though there are people who need me in that space, and there are people who need people like me in that space. So it's a complicated question.
Wow. Well, I thank you for your advocacy for sure. And, we're going to make sure that in our show notes, we share out everything that, Willie's passionate about right now. So, opportunities for people to get more engaged and support, what needs to be supported in this, this Commonwealth, which can be awfully backwards in a lot of things. Right. And I think, we need to work diligently to kind of open up our minds a bit and open up our communities to these perspectives. Obviously, we need to open up Frankfurt because they've no bad ideas go unlegislated in Frankfurt. It seems like on LGBTQ issues, on teacher issues. You told me a story earlier that I kind of want to give you some time to retell it to the viewers. So you've been in some pretty amazing spots this year, right? So
Yeah.
those glasses have been on display in the halls of power and privilege in amazing ways. Tell us a little bit about your interaction with the president.
So it was actually the day before I met the president that I kind of had the thought for the first time I might not go back to school because something really negative had happened. I tweeted something about it and woke up to 65,000 people responding, I think. And of those people, one was a father who was writing me about his child who goes to school in Kentucky, who for the first time ever had tried to share a part of their identity and wore a tiny little rainbow pin. And this father was beside himself, emotionally distraught, because he said, this is the first time in my kid's life I can't fight this. I can't say to the kid it's going to be okay because I don't know that it's going to be okay. And it was a moment of clarity. I said, this is what you talk to the president about. You're not going to advocate for anything else. You're just going to pick this one kid because that's what teachers do. We have kids in front of us and we secure their needs. So I went to CVS like an idiot and thought, I'm going to write a card to the president and just say, hey, please sign this. And I'm going to sneak it into the White House. So I got this card, wrote a message about how sometimes when we share parts of ourselves, people aren't receptive, but we have to keep believing because people are going to want to know us. And then I write a letter in case someone tries to take the card from me, explaining what this letter is, hoping that they will just sign it and give it back to me. So I get to meet him. There's like a 3-minute interview thing before there's a picture, and it's just word vomit. And I'm trying to talk. And Dr. Biden actually stops me and says, we know about the advocacy you do. Is everything we need to know in this letter, in this card? And I say, yes. And they take it and say, we'll take care of this. And I immediately thought, no, you're not. But that's really nice of you because I can only imagine how busy they are. And when we got back from France, there was a package at my doorstep addressed to that child from the White House. So I had to wait, had to contact the father and go, I have no idea what this is. They didn't tell me. We got to meet. I got to meet the kid too. And it was a signed letter from the president of the United States to a single kid, reminding that kid that even the president of the United States had moments when he was a kid and he tried to open up and it didn't go well, but that didn't mean that he wasn't going to change the world. And he hopes that this kid remembers that he's going to change the world. That's what teaching is, right? It's recognizing the potential in people. It's recognizing the potential in situations. It's the ultimate hopeful profession. Because if you don't think good things are going to happen, you can't do it, right? Your heart wouldn't let you.
That's amazing. What a gift you gave that child and that father, who I'm sure was just racked and didn't know what to do. How amazing! And yeah, I think it's a good move by Joe Biden. Sure, Jill Biden, the teacher, but any White House would have done this. Clearly, any White House would have done this, right? I'm sorry. I can't even imagine. We let in with the kind of Rey-Delago idea that Trump would ever go out of his way for another human that was struggling. Just strikes me as, I'm sorry that my mind went there immediately because, President Biden deserves his due and Dr. Jill Biden absolutely does as well. But, it strikes me as what we can do for one another, with some compassion and help people through tough spaces. And I think politicians, when they do the work well, can be a huge asset in those
Mhm.
efforts, right? Or they can be what we see right now in Frankfurt, right? Or maybe not right now
Mhm.
because they're out of session, thankfully. They can't do any damage right now.
Until they allow
But
themselves the rules that let them be in session whenever they want.
yeah,
But we're going
yes,
to be hopeful, and that's not going to happen.
we're going to be hopeful. We're going to remain hopeful at all times. The cynicism, it sneaks in, right? You know, you turn off the light at night and the cynicism sneaks in. But Willie, on that point though, so Frankfurt, you know, it's where theoretically our Commonwealth comes together to fix issues in our Commonwealth. And I think for a long time, people have known that teaching is, you know, there's some challenges, right? And right now it seems like there's a hue and cry about a teacher short, whether it's happening now or
Mhm.
soon to happen. Seems like the pipeline is shrinking in terms of teachers. What do you understand about that? You know, what's happening now? What should Frankfurt, you think, be doing to support teachers and more teachers if we're truly gonna be low on teachers coming up?
Well, a bigger question might be what should they not be doing? But I'll give them. No, I won't. I will state it is much worse in some other states, and I feel bad for those teachers. But I think what we keep seeing are sort of conservative responses stating, "Oh, this is an issue of or of failing schools, or teachers don't want to be with these sorts of kids." Ask any teacher. Go find whoever is watching. Go call a teacher and say. Um, Stack them 1 to 10. Where do kids fall in terms of the problems? Kids are never the problem. That's the reason teachers show up. Teachers are going to say money and respect, those two things. And the cost of living has gone up, inflation has gone up, all of these things have gone up. And for everyone else, I think it's more acute in the last couple of years. But teachers haven't seen significant raises in a very long time. And so that's the one thing that's easy. I think every single teacher I know who's left the profession was easily able to find a job and get more money. I don't know a single person who had to take a pay cut to do it. So you've got people who can make more money elsewhere doing other things. And so then why would someone stay? Why did I stay for so long? Because you hope you can make a difference and you want to feel that you're somehow helping your community. And so when we see disrespect and when we see people tying the hands of teachers who want to make a difference, they now have no reason to stay. And I personally, I think that's what I keep seeing over and over. When you tell teachers you're not going to be able to read books written by Black people or books written by brown people, or you can't say the word gay, or you can't talk about queer issues. When we ask teachers to do things that they know are harmful to students, for me, that's when a line is drawn. For me, that's when the line was drawn. I could not return in those circumstances. And it's not the same in every school. But if we look at the numbers, those are the districts that people are trying to get into. So that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing some data from the Kentucky Department of Education, which finds, you know, and this isn't new, this has been around for a few months, that 72% of our current teaching workforce, 72% of them are at risk of leaving their jobs soon. And you know, these are folks who either haven't been teachers for that long, so less than 5 years, who should be, you know, kind of the future of the education profession. Teachers with 25 years or more, you know, who are kind of on their way out, and educators who've left teaching once but returned. So those are kind of the main chunks of people who are kind of at risk of leaving soon. And you know, that's a huge number, 72%, right? And I think what we've also seen is in the kind of recent history, 2015 to 2016 school year, 16% of all the education positions posted in the Kentucky employment placement system go unfilled, right? And that's a little bit, you know, I think that number, I'd like to see an updated number, because my hunch is it's much higher, you know, given what we're seeing in the workforce generally, right? As you noted, people can leave and go find better pay and a lot of different options right now. And so you know, this is terrifying to me as a you know, as a father, obviously, and anyone who's just invested in our Commonwealth doing better. We got to have solid public education, and you know, it's hard to look at what went on in Frankfurt in the last session, where they had a historic opportunity. They had an amazing budgetary surplus and chose to give a lot of raises to state employees, but took a pass on making sure that they gave teachers a raise. Right.
Every single state employee except for teachers.
And they took a pass on making sure the transportation budgets were fully filled. They basically took a pass on a lot of things in education, and instead kind of made teachers' jobs harder. Interjecting this politics into what they could teach. The idea of teaching accurate history was all of a sudden a problem legislatively for them. You got to make sure that they get the kids get the Ronald Reagan speech right. Like, what in the world? So I think it doesn't seem to be giving a warm welcome to more teachers to come into our state and do what's this critically important work. I don't know.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think about young people who tell me, "Oh, I wish I could have been a teacher." I hear this all the time. I wish I could have been a teacher, but I saw what my teachers went through. I saw how unhappy they were, and so they chose not to do. And that's the other side of this. You've got teachers leaving. You've got no one coming to replace them because it's only 4 years between leaving school and coming back to it. So it doesn't take very long at all in terms of a culture shift. And I think what sometimes goes unsaid is what we all know is happening, which is that the men in Frankfort are still angry about Matt Bevin, and they're still punishing teachers for it. And they're punishing teachers, and it's hurting children. It's hurting communities so that they can get back for some political reason.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And whether it's pensions or whether it's the interjecting, kind of tying their hands, and then of course, well, hey, if we've got school shootings, let's just go ahead and arm the teachers and make them, our like de facto police force, right? Like it's outrageous the ideas that seem to take hold in Frankfurt right now under the current, current leadership. So, we talked about politics. We mentioned before, that we don't have a lot of days. We got 83 days to set the stage for something different in Frankfurt. Really, like that's what it comes down to. If we want to create a commonwealth that is supporting teachers, that is funding teachers, that is giving them the resources they need to be effective and welcomed and lauded, and make it very clear that we appreciate teachers, that has to come from Frankfurt. It can't just come from the local PTA. We've got to have some level setting throughout this commonwealth because we have communities that are not stepping up, right? So it's got to come from the top. I think there's some great leadership. I think Jason Glass, I think it's really some fine folks in the current leadership, but their hands are tied by tied by the legislature. So we need to have politicians who are getting on board, right, and don't see the current administration as a roadblock to be stymied, but as a partner to be worked with. And I'm just be blatantly partisan here. We have got to throw out a bunch of these lawmakers and replace them with folks, who probably have a D by their name. That's probably what's gonna need to happen. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, Willie. But that's my take on it right now.
Vote Democrat, please, if you care about schools, because if there's some magical Republican who is willing to do the work to keep every single kid in public school safe and who is willing to do the work to give us the funding that we need. So they can have all the talking points that they want, that schools are perfectly well funded. Well, if schools are perfectly well funded, then why are there dozens of vacancies in your local school? Why are your kids sitting in rooms with substitutes and learning nothing? Because no one wants to be there, because there's no money there. And if there's no money there, then where's the funding?
It kind of doesn't matter what the guy says on the campaign trail, because what they're going to do is they're going to be part of that Republican supermajority or majority, and they're going to put Damon Thayer in charge or Robert Stivers in charge, and then they're going to have this agenda that is horrible, right? So it kind of doesn't matter what your person says; they're just a part of that larger problem. Which is the distribution of power in Frankfurt and how the GOP super duper majority can kind of do whatever the heck they want to do. Right?
And there are enough people in that super majority who are going to get rich if charter schools take off, who will get rich if your kid learns nothing, who will get rich if your kid does poorly in school, who will get rich if your school fails. Those are the people who are going to be setting the tone. Those are the people who have the agenda. And those are the people we've got to get out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I barely mentioned we didn't even mention charter schools, but that's they opened up that door last session with funding apparatus so they could make sure that they are taking public funds and putting them into these private institutions, and it's just horrendous, really.
And the thing that's just funny to me is, so we have no one willing to take these compared to private schools or charter schools fairly nicely paid positions, right? So your charter school is going to pay next to nothing compared to what a public school is paying. Who in the world are the people who are going to be working in these schools? That's the part that always confuses me, because they're not going to have nearly the funding of a public school.
That's a good point, for sure. We shall see what they hath wrought, right? I'm not sure they are quite clear about what they're going to do, but I'm sure that there will be a lot of corporations that are based out of Kentucky that make a lot of money in that model. So, all right. So thanks again for joining us and sharing the kind of your perspective and what what you've been seeing as a teacher and as an ally and as a voice for kids. We're going to do another story, and then we need to move on to Hank Linderman, who's of course our guest, who is running for Congress in the 2nd District of Kentucky. But before we do that, I want to do at least one story from the news. We have got Rand Paul, and good God, he is horrible. Is what I just take away. Last week was not a great week for Rand Paul, right? He voted against sick veterans getting health care. After he voted against action on climate change, on prescription drug prices, on tax fairness. He then went all in on Trump in the wake of the FBI's Mar-a-Lago seizure. First, suggests the FBI probably planted evidence, right? So he's on Fox and Friends, speculating wildly, talking about how the FBI, we couldn't see what was in the boxes, so I'm sure they planted evidence, kind of echoing that claim while trying to increase his stature as a national leader on the right, because that's what he desperately wants to be seen as, a national leader from the right wing. Do I know that the boxes of material they took from Mar-a-Lago, that they won't put things into those boxes to entrap him? Paul said. How do we know? The lawyers weren't allowed to see the boxes because he was there apparently and talked to the lawyers. How do we know they're going to be honest with us about what's actually in the boxes? How do we know there was in the box before it left the residence that the lawyers weren't allowed to see everything? So he's, fanning the flames, which of course we know that those types of remarks absolutely inflamed the right wing. Truth Social exploded, and then people literally die, right? So a guy in Cincinnati decided he needed to assault the FBI, and he ended up dead. So Rand Paul and all the folks like him, are speculating wildly and throwing the FBI under the bus just because the FBI was doing the work they're supposed to be doing, right? Inflaming these kind of cultural tensions in a way that is just so incredibly dangerous. He also threw out the idea of impeaching Merrick Garland for some reason. That's something he also threw out as a good idea. And then just as people were kind of catching up to the crazy that he was spewing, he topped it. He's saying that the Espionage Act was really the problem, and it would be best if we didn't have this law to protect state secrets. It's astounding that that's where he went, right? Can't trust the FBI. Oh, and also we just shouldn't be, we shouldn't be protecting our state secrets. The Espionage Act, which of course, spies have famously been put to death because of the Espionage Act. The fact that's on the table in Rand Paul's universe is shocking to me. Although probably not that shocking, because actually probably if you polled most of the folks, if they see that Trump could go down because of the Espionage Act, then I'm sure a majority of Republicans say we should get rid of the Espionage Act. I don't know, Willie, is that a story you've been following at all? Any the lows that Rand Paul will go?
It's hard not to see. It's like an accident, right? It has been a constant 3-year accident that every time I'm near a window is there. It's astounding. It's astounding that let's back the blue and defund the FBI. It's astounding that there is for a party that says we have truth and morality and we have to maintain that truth. There's literally no consistent truth at all. Nothing is real except for Trump for them. No. How do you counter that? It gets back to where are the grown-ups? I want to have a conversation with someone, but one of the tenets of argumentative approaches that I teach in English is that you have to share evidence before you can talk about it. We share nothing. The only fact that seems to be true is Trump is perfect, and anything that shows otherwise has to be wrong. It is closer to a religion than a political party or a political ideology.
Oh, it's been staggering to watch the evolution of the excuses, right? Like, oh yeah, no, this is just another witch hunt. There's nothing. Oh yeah, the FBI probably planted it. Oh well, I actually declassified everything because I have a magic wand and I can declassify all documents. It's like, well, why would you declassify these documents that were like made up, right? Apparently, it's just
Oh,
astounding to watch. And the fact that and then Rand Paul's like, I can do you one better. Let's get rid of the Espionage Act. Just showing his fealty to that viewpoint and to that perspective, which of course, like it's probably a good strategy in red state if you want to get reelected. Probably to play to that base.
should we do this? Should we make treating kids with dignity be the one thing that is always true? And we just ask a bunch of what ifs, like what if Republicans are secretly worshiping Satan and trying to harm kids? Like I could do it, but I think that smart people with integrity are going to, not that there's anything wrong with worshiping Satan if that's what you do. Just trying to upset the populace. But I'm just saying, I think smart thinking people would reject that approach. So my question is, why are so many people not rejecting this approach?
I don't know. It's staggering to me, and I don't have a good answer. But they've got truth because they're on Truth Social, right? So there's their truth. Clearly it's a shifting landscape of what is fact. But yeah, you alluded to it. I love the idea that you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts, except for now against the Trump Republicans, in which case it's all out the window. All right, so we do need to move on to our guest, which is I think a really wonderful opportunity for us. As we've mentioned a number of times in this show, we've got 82 days because the polls just closed, right? So we just flipped over from 83 days to 82 days between now and the next election and our chance to vote out Rand Paul. Well, there's a bunch of other members of Congress in Washington, D.C. that are not standing up for our values. And you maybe haven't even heard of all of them. But we know that we got Andy Barr here in the 6th district, and that's a guy that we'd love to see replaced by Ken Cravens. But it's not just Andy Barr, it's not just Rand Paul. We have got coming to us from the other side of the state, Hank Linderman running in the 2nd district. And Hank, thank you so much for joining the show, and we're really excited to hear what you've got to say about your campaign and what you're doing and how you're doing it and why you want to get to DC. So thanks. Tell us a little bit about you, Hank, and what inspired you to get involved to fight for our democracy and try to get to DC.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be part of the show. The progressive voice is sometimes tough to find here in Kentucky. Well, grew up in Louisville, and I was a musician, which is kind of why I was hoping to talk to your producer on your show. Anyway, I worked in music when I was started out in Louisville, ended up moving to California. And while in California, I worked for a lot of really well-known musicians, including Joni Mitchell, Chicago, the Eagles, and worked for Don Henley on his last record. I've done several records with Timothy Schmidt and with Robert Lamb from Chicago. But after Trump's election, I got quite concerned and actually got challenged to run for Congress in Kentucky. Now, by the way, even though we were living in California at the time, we had never really left Kentucky because this is where our friends and family are. My wife was born and raised in Kentucky. So we had been spending time back and forth between working in California and also living in Kentucky. Anyway, I decided to run the end of 2017, and in the 2nd district, they didn't even have a candidate in 2016. So I figured that was a great place to run. By the way, our house that we've had here in the 2nd district for, I think, 17 years is 3 doors from where my wife's family had a place. This is rural Kentucky. It's deep red Kentucky. All of our neighbors are Republicans, but most of them would drop whatever they're doing if we need help, and only one of them calls me a socialist or communist to my face. So we get along pretty well. And also, by the way, I'm progressive in the sense that if Bernie says it, I probably agree. I don't focus a lot on ideology because I don't believe that approach works very well out here. And in fact, one of the things I run into constantly is the frustration that Democrats feel because they're coming from a perspective that's centered in a city: Louisville, Lexington, Frankfurt, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. And the mindset in those cities is very different from the mindset out in Grayson County. I'm here at the end of a chip and seal road. And that might be interesting to talk about because I think that's a big issue. By the way, I'm also chair of the Rural Council to the Kentucky Democratic Party. That's an advisory council. We have a motion in front of the State Central Executive Committee asking that the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th districts be made a priority for the Democratic Party. You know, boy, I'm going to just rattle on just a little bit longer. You know, I talk to voters all the time. And one of the few things I can find that everybody agrees on is when I say, you know, it seems to me that neither one of our parties is doing a great job taking care of the people. That's 100%. At least out here in the 2nd district. That's Republicans and Democrats, Black people, white people, young people, old people, all genders, all religions, liberal, conservative. They all agree. And what that means is neither one of our parties is truly connected to the people. Well, to me, that's an alternative. That's a huge opportunity. And I think also Republicans don't want advice from Democrats, and we sure don't want any advice from Republicans. So changing the Republican Party, that's up to Republicans, and changing the Democratic Party to connect them better with people is our job. I'm running on the idea that there are two main ways for us to do that. First, we Democrats have to go after the largest group of voters, working people. And by the way, that includes teachers, farmers, factory workers, construction workers, hospital workers, healthcare workers, folks working in the grocery store, delivery people, truck drivers, musicians. We're the original gig workers. That's the largest group. And again, we're not talking to individual identities when we talk to working people. We're talking to Black people, white people, young, old, and so on. The other group we've got to come to terms with is the group of voters that is the most overrepresented in the United States, and you could say holds tremendous sway, and that's rural voters. For the same population, rural voters get more than twice the legislative representation than city folks do. And yet Democrats don't really seem to have a message for people living in rural areas. And I'm running to give a real option, a credible option to the Republican side of things.
That's awesome. And I'd love to hear it. I mean, your point about rural voters, I think, is incredibly important. Glad to hear about, you know, and I was aware of your work with that kind of rural committee. What kind of, how do you demonstrate, you know, that the party's there for rural communities, I guess, is a good question, right? Because I think right now we've got, in so many instances, people are just defaulting to these cultural battles, right? And so if you're a Democrat, oh, that means you're Nancy Pelosi, and I hate Nancy Pelosi, right? But, you know, like, how do you break through, you know, kind of the foxification of our news ecosystem to let people know, actually, no, Democrats are trying to do things that will help you. What's your approach been like, Hank?
First of all, I'm in a district that's very difficult to go door to door. It takes more than 2 hours to drive across the district. It's 21 counties. So going door to door is not really an option. So I end up going to places where people congregate, for example, Walmart. And I walk around with my handouts, and you can't tell by looking at someone whether they're Republican or Democrat. And I walk up to them with my handout and say, my name's Hank. I'm running for Congress. I'm asking for your vote this November. I'm a damn Democrat, but I'm also a working person, and I think we need more working people in Congress. And about 80% of the people I talk to, including Republicans, agree with this idea. Now, all of this is going to take a long time to change the way Democrats are perceived out in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th. But you got to start somewhere. I also want to make it clear to you all, I don't talk like regular politicians. Regular politicians say, when we win in November. I'm not really focused on winning. I'm focused on moving things forward, organizing in this second district, introducing folks from Davis County to Warren County to Hardin County to Breck County to Meade County to Muhlenberg to Ohio to Barron County. All these folks need to meet each other and get to know each other. You all in Louisville and Lexington are used to having these big population centers, which default to give you a lot of political power. But if the Democratic parties in Davis, Hardin, and Warren County spoke together, they would represent more voters than Fayette County. So that's the big job that I am focusing on, is organizing. Another way of saying this is, I don't want to promise you any apple pie. I don't have any apples. I don't even have any apple trees, but I do have these apple seeds.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Hank. So what I thought was remarkable, you cannot deny that over the past month or so, the worm has turned for the Biden administration. They've been racking up victories left over right, like hand over fist. The fact that they've been able to get things through, some bipartisan, which is what Joe Biden said he was going to try to do. I was very skeptical, but he's gotten some very big bipartisan efforts through the CHIPS Act to supercharge American superconductor manufacturing. He got the veterans healthcare expansion for the folks affected by burn pits and other toxic exposures. That's pretty amazing. The bonus point is that he absolutely pissed off Mitch McConnell in doing it. So it's like gets the legislation and gets the victory of seeing Mitch really mad, making them go on record against some of these the veterans bill. But right now, so just this week, right? So just yesterday, they passed this really historic clean energy, climate change bill, this, prescription drugs, and also other healthcare provisions. Really, it's going to deliver for American consumers. It's going to reduce their energy costs. It's going to reduce the amount. It's going to give a lot of subsidies so that people can have a more green energy system. It's going to, lead to cheaper drugs. Like, that's awesome, because the price of prescription drugs is like through the roof, and we got to do something about it. And every politician's always said they're going to do something about it, but this is like the first time in my lifetime that I recall it actually happening.
Well, Aaron, so would it be okay?
I promise you there's a question here.
Could I push back on that for a second?
No, not right now.
Okay.
What I will say is, when this all happens, right? So these big legislative victories happen. You can pick them up and critique any of my characterizations of them. You go to what the Republicans are doing, and all they're doing is crying inflation and socialism and big government or whatever. You look at Brett Guthrie, who is the guy who currently holds the second district seat. He is the ranking member on one of the key subcommittees of the Energy and Commerce Committee. So despite all this stuff, you can't see him say anything hopeful about addressing climate change. You can't see him say anything hopeful about reducing any healthcare costs. All he's got is to beat up on the idea of Democrats, right? Not the actual legislation itself. He can't get into the weeds of legislation because, they just don't have an agenda of helping people. They just want to scare people. So how do you counter that, right? When they've got the megaphone and they're just putting out so much misinformation, how do you counter that with no, really, here's how Democrats are doing something that will appreciably make your life better in this historic, legislative victory. How do we do it? Hank, what do you got any tips for us?
Well, first of all, I think we have to be a little bit more realistic about, for example, the prescription drugs. And yes, it's a breakthrough that Medicare is going to be allowed to negotiate prescription drug prices, but it's only for seniors, and it's only drugs, and it doesn't begin for 4 years. We have 20,000 drugs that are currently in our medical system, and what the drug companies are going to do for any drugs that they lose money on, having to sell them at a proper price, lose profit. They won't really lose money, they'll lose profit. They're simply going to raise prices on the rest. So unfortunately, that portion of the Inflation Reduction Act is a victory for drug companies. And I think we have problems within our own party. I saw a stat recently that said the number 2 recipient of big pharma money is Chuck Schumer. So he's a Democrat. we're going to have to do a better job of that. Does not represent the people. I also want to tell you some of the things we have done with the Rural Council. We brought an author named Thomas Frank to Kentucky. And if you don't know Thomas Frank, here's my favorite book of his. It's called Listen Liberal. This was written released in spring of 2016. He predicted Trump winning the nomination and the presidency. And this is tough love for Democrats by a Democrat. And by the way, the subtitle of this book is Whatever Happened to the Party of the People? Whatever happened? And he goes into incredible detail about it. Now, until we are able to break our own connections to Wall Street, Silicon Valley, big energy, big pharma, we're going to have a very difficult time actually doing the people's business. And, Willie, you talked about maybe wanting to have someone to discuss things with that disagree with you a little bit. I talk with Trump voters all the time, and I'll tell you my approach. When I meet someone who's a Trump supporter or who disagrees with me right away, that I basically try to find out what's on their mind. And if they say something that I don't agree with, I go, oh, wow. And they say something else I don't agree with, I go, mm-hmm. And they'll finally get to something I can agree with. And that's what we talk about. And by the time that discussion's over, we're friends. And they're now willing to handle a little bit of pushback. But if I go at them in city fashion, like I would in Louisville, which is, you're wrong because reasons, you're wrong, but it just doesn't work. We've got to make a human connection to folks out in rural areas if we're going to get anywhere. Their positions soften up. By the way, when you dig in with you're wrong and reasons, all you've done is dig them in to their own mindset. So, we have so much division in this country, and that's about the only thing that we individual citizens can deal with. We can't deal with corruption individually. We can't deal with inequality, but we can deal with division. Division is what allows corruption, which causes inequality, and inequality creates more division. Division is where we can make a difference. Nobody from the top is going to be able to deal with division. Abraham Lincoln couldn't come back from the dead and fix the division in this country, but we can by being neighborly, by being, taking the temperature down just a little bit. I think it's bad juju to constantly be criticizing each other because we're not listening to each other. It doesn't get anywhere. Sorry, I went on there for a little long.
That's what we do here, Hank. That's what we do. It's fine. And speaking of, I think you're completely right in that, everyone wants to feel heard, right? And so having a chance to share your views and, absolutely waiting for the opportunity to find something you agree with seems smart because, it might take a minute, but hey, that's fine. We got time. Willie, any thoughts that you've got about, because you live in a fairly rural community. You've been teaching at a school that, has, I think, a fair amount of rural folks in it. What do you think we need to be doing about this? Or do you have a question for Hank or thoughts about the rural urban divide and how we can do something to kind of bridge some of these gaps? Uh-oh. We were having some connection issues. It seems like.
Are we good now?
Go ahead. Yep.
I think it's interesting that our conversation is mirroring some data that Pew put out just like 3 days ago. We are negative characteristics that we think about each other, Republicans and Democrats, are at an all-time high, as we all could have guessed. But what's amazing is just in 5 years, they've gone up another 20%. So imagining the other side is dishonest, immoral, or unintelligent, those are 70, 72, and 52%. The places where we see discrepancy is exactly what we're talking about as well. Democrats are 13% more likely than Republicans to see the other party as closed-minded, which is certainly something that I was saying at the beginning. And I love loving people. It's my modus operandi. But I think where I am right now is I also love protecting people, and I have a hard time turning down the volume when I've seen what happens to LGBTQ kids, for example. When we let people go off the way they are and we don't try to counter it. And I think I'm trying to find those moderates. That's when I say I want to speak to a grown up. And what I love that Hank is doing is the conception that is most vast out of all the ones that Pew measured is Republicans at 62% believe that Democrats are lazy. That's a full 26% more than Democrats think that about Republicans. So it's actually the biggest discrepancy in our hatred, in that there's a general consensus as a rule on the right that the left is lazy. So I love countering that narrative, and I like that you're doing it in an approachable way. So I think maybe if both sides, maybe you're right, Hank, in that the approach might get to the reasons as opposed to the reasons getting to the truth.
Yeah. Are you all, I don't know if you all are hearing me. Just so you know, Willie, when I lived back in California, my wife and I were co-founders, along with some other parents, of the first bullying prevention task force in Los Angeles County. So this was probably 13, 15 years ago. It was a while back. And we had no idea what we were doing. We thought, oh, this is great. We're going to end bullying in our schools. And got in the first meeting and realized there were 13 constituent groups that disagreed with each other, parents, teachers, students, administrators, board members, the lunchroom lady from the middle school who turns out to be the one person at the middle school who looks every kid in the eye every day. And she's the first person to know when a kid is in trouble. It took us a while. We had no idea what we were doing, but we ultimately implemented the Olveus program, which is also, I understand, in use in Kentucky for bullying prevention. So I'm very sensitive about this idea. I'm going to propose, and Willie, let's talk sometime. I'm paying attention right now to Jonathan Haidt, who is I guess a social psychologist maybe, and he talks about why good people disagree over religion and politics is one of his books, and he's got a recent book called well, he's been talking quite a bit about the difference in morality, perceptions of morality between liberals and conservatives. And it turns out that conservatives have more points that are important to them than liberals do. We're very concerned about protecting each other. We're very concerned about equality, but we are not great with authority. And Republicans, conservatives tend to like and respect authority and see a need for authority, for example, or willingness to belong to a team that's stronger in conservatives. And these moral shortcuts are ways that we have to start considering when we're talking with each other. We've got to, it's not that, by the way, that liberals don't value these things, they're just lower on the scale. So as we study all of this, I'm going to say this, I've met very few, in fact, I'm going to say no, I can't think of any evil people I've met. And I think most of us are trying to do the best we can. There are, of course, exceptions that, by the way, I sat at Fancy Farm. I'm going to show you all some pictures, by the way, so we know what we're talking about. This is from the district I live in. I've covered up the license plate, but this is someone that we were driving along the road and there they were. This is my backyard. So that's what's wonderful about living out here. It's just a beautiful area. This is from Fancy Farm, and that is Jamie Comer giving me stink eye as I was sitting on the stage at Fancy Farm. This was my first Fancy Farm experience, and I got invited by Jimmy Osbrooks to sit on the stage with him, which I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not, but I told him I'd be honored, so I showed up and did it. I ended up sitting next to Charles Booker because he ended up with an empty seat next to him. He turned around and said, "Hank, you want to come up here?" Sure. This is how close I was to the speakers. And there's Jimmy addressing the crowd right there. So this is what we are up against. And by the way, the Democratic Party is talking about not showing up at Fancy Farm next year. This is a massive error. This is a great place to show up and show that you can hold your head high even when someone's throwing things at you. And what's wrong with losing a competition to see who's a bigger ass? Why wouldn't you want to lose that competition? That's so. Look, there's a lot of people there. It was I enjoyed it tremendously. I'm planning on being there next year. And I hope you all can sense a little bit of the disconnect that goes on between Louisville, Lexington, and Frankfort and the rest of the state. Another way to think about this is if you're a Democrat in Louisville, you can win. You probably will win. If you're a Democrat in Lexington, you are competitive. But if you're a Democrat in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, or 5th, you're toxic. There is no acceptable Democratic message out there, and it's our fault because we have stopped reaching out there is virtually no democratic messaging in 1245, I call it. So I believe in the idea of I know that it will work. You guys have probably had Chris Hartman on from Fairness. Has Chris been on your show?
Yep.
Chris is an inspiring individual. They've gotten a fairness ordinance in the very conservative town of Henderson. And look, they raise money and they go out and lobby. It's perceived as a democratic, this is a democratic concern. It's a social justice, BLM and LGBTQ. It's actually done by a private group that are nonpartisan. But because there's no other democratic message, it's assumed that all Democrats care about is social justice. That's it. And in the absence of talking about higher wages for working people, safer places to work, rural hospitals that stay open, a healthcare system that won't bankrupt you because someone you love gets sick, rural broadband is too spotty throughout this. You get the idea here that if we're not going to talk to these folks, if all we talk about are identity issues, we're going to fail. And by the way, if you're a politician coming out to the 2nd District, the identity of the 2nd District is largely white, largely blue collar, largely Christian. And if I try to talk to them about BLM and LGBTQ without acknowledging their identities, it's a swing and a miss. There's no connection. So I also want to point out, identity politics are important. Identity is a search for dignity, a search for respect. It's important, but it's also the way that the ruling elites are able to divide us, and that's to encourage divisions along identity lines. I've got another great book to show you. This is called On Corruption by Sarah Chase. She's from West Virginia. And she gives 7 examples on 5 continents where a ruling elite that was under threat encouraged identity politics as a way to remain in power. So while we're concerned about our identities, we also have to really find things in common. If we build a consensus, if we build a coalition of Democrats that includes social justice folks and labor folks and so on and so on and so on, and that coalition is based on the idea that I'm going to give you what you want if you'll give me what I want. Well, what happens is when one group gets what they want, they pull out. So we really have to make it a more basic connection, which is why I say working people. Working people and families are people that are in families, that's like 90% of us. So sorry, I've gone on again way too long. I apologize.
I absolutely appreciate all the ideas you've shared with us. You've given us a lot to chew on for sure, Hank. Seems like you're doing an amazing job of, spreading the word within a community that's tough sledding. That district is, as you said, very challenging, and it's not necessarily about winning so much as about getting your ideas out there and meeting folks and organizing for the long haul, which is wonderful, because that can pay dividends at the local level. And I know there are, you're not the only Democrat in the district. There's actually some House seats that I think are that send Democrats to Frankfurt. So, there are chances to improve for sure. It's actually a growing area as well, right? So Warren County, I think, is growing. There's a chance there to increase margins. But I appreciate all the work you're doing. We'd love to have you back. Share some of these ideas and have a deeper conversation about a couple of them. But what I did want to say is that it's long haul work in Kentucky, right? We know we're not going to flip this state anytime soon, but we need to think about what our strategies are and elevate some of the best ideas. And we appreciate the work that you're doing, Hank, for sure.
Well, thank you all for having me, and let's do this more often.
Absolutely. And Hank does go live on his Facebook page. So Hank, how can people find you? I know we've shared one of the websites. We can share the rest of your social handles as well, but where do you want folks to go?
The main place to go would be my personal Facebook page at the moment, and I go live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's not. I went live 5 days a week for a year during COVID, and that about killed me. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 11 Central, noon Eastern. And Willie, if you'd like to join me on the show, that would be fun to have a conversation. And it's called Fixing Things, and I have my own theme music here. I'll play you a little bit of it. Oh, it's not. Oh, well, never mind.
Sounds great.
Sorry about
I would
that.
love it. I would love it.
All right. Well, it'd be great to have you all on. And thank you all so much. And have a great evening.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to need to close out the show. We went a little bit long, which, happens from time to time. We got a few things as a kind of a call to action for you. But before I do the close, I just wanted to say, again, Willie, thanks for being a guest co-host with me tonight. Really appreciate the time you put in and the perspective and the passion you shared with us.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. It's a pleasure, honestly, to talk about rural issues and queer issues. I'm at the convergence of both of those, so I know what it's like to be a rural person and feel left out. I also know what it's like to be a queer person and feel left out, and sometimes I feel both. I also want to thank the LGBTQIA Council of the Kentucky Democratic Party, who I was supposed to speak with tonight, but who suggested that I come speak. They're doing awesome work at looking at not just social justice politics, but actually looking at all of those aspects, especially work, especially life, especially civil rights, and how we can make sure to protect people in Kentucky. So thank you all. And thank you all for letting me come and talk. It's always a pleasure. It's always fun. Anytime you want me, I'm here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Willie. So see a few call to actions. We got a really new, important opportunity and resource for you. Our friends at Forward Kentucky have put together a wonderful new online resource to help keep track of candidates, of endorsements, fundraising, all the info you need to know over this next 83 days. So head to Forward Kentucky, forwardky.com, election-central-home to find out more and sign up. Also, are you going to work to help protect Kentucky access to abortion? I hope you are. If Kansas can do it, why can't Kentucky? Planned Parenthood and the ACLU are working hard to oppose the constitutional amendment to ban all abortion access in Kentucky. They need your help. You can visit their link to sign up and find out more. It's protectkentucky.com. And then we are very, very close to getting where we wanted to be. We've got a poll right now. We've got over 269 responses. We'd really like to hit, at least 300. So that's within spitting distance. Can you take 5 minutes right now and help us pick the worst actions of the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad legislature? Again, if we hit 300 responses, we're going to share it with the media, help remind voters what the GOP super duper majority is actually doing to our Commonwealth in Frankfurt. And then finally, we are going to be back next week. I hope you join us. We got another couple awesome guests. We've got the mayor of Midway, Grayson Vandegrift, who's running for State House in the 56th district. He's going to be joining us in the campaign corner. And we're also going to be interviewing Farah Alexander. She is the author of a couple of books, including Resistance in the Bluegrass, Empowering the Commonwealth. So I hope you will join us either on the pod platform of your choice or live here on Facebook or on YouTube. As we head out, I want to just remind you that Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State, organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, known as CAVE. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. The production this evening is by the one and only NATO. Thank you so much for your help, Nate. And also thanks for the theme song. You can find out more information and music at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook, don't worry. You can rewatch shows and see our source links on Facebook, or audio podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you get your pods. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. They've got a website if you want more information. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.